The galaxy does not whisper. It roars in unrelenting agony, and somewhere between the screams of the dying and the unyielding march of the Imperium, there exists a creature that embodies chaos itself. Born of warp-spawned corruption, a grotesque mockery of life, the chaos spawn moves without purpose, yet spreads ruin with inevitability. Flesh twists in impossible angles, eyes burn with unholy fire, and minds, if such fragile things exist within these abominations, are shattered beyond comprehension. To witness one is to see reality fray, to smell the essence of despair, and to understand that some horrors are eternal. Here, in the darkness between stars, they lurk in the ruins of worlds, in the hollow decks of derelict void ships, and even in the midst of battlefield carnage, embodying the raw, unshaped fury of the warp. No tactic, no fortification, no psyker's might can predict their form or intent. And yet their arrival always signals the inexorable corruption of order. Even the Adeptus Astartes, seasoned in the art of warfare and trained to face horrors beyond human comprehension, tremble when confronted by the writhing monstrosities of the warp. Every shot may slow their advance, but cannot halt the inevitable. For chaos spawn are as mutable as the thoughts of the dark gods themselves. And in their wake, nothing remains untouched. Machinery rusts, souls fray, and the line between reality and nightmare dissolves. If this vision chills you, pause for a moment. Consider the impossibility of survival in a universe where the very fabric of life can turn against you, where a single aberration can undo centuries of discipline and order. This is not legend nor an exaggerated story told in hushed voices. It is the lived terror of worlds forgotten by the light of the Astronomicon. As we descend into this tale of cosmic horror, I invite you to join the journey. Witness, understand, and perhaps shudder as we unravel the cursed existence of chaos spawn. If the depths of despair, the edge of terror, and the boundless fury of the warp intrigue you, then like, share, and subscribe, and step with me into the darkness that the Imperium dare not acknowledge. The first sign is never obvious. It begins not with a roar or a scream, but with a subtle gnawing at the edges of the mind. A soldier, a civilian, or a psyker feels a whisper when the void should be silent, an almost imperceptible tension that coils in the chest like metal serpents. These are the earliest moments of corruption, the subtle seductions of the warp. Few recognize it at first, for the mind is resilient, and the flesh has yet to betray its host. But the warp is patient, and patience is its weapon. It infiltrates the body not through the senses, but through the very marrow, the veins, the bone itself, until the host becomes a cage for an insidious force. By the time the first twitch of aberration appears, the soul is already frayed, and the body, loyal though it may be, begins to betray its will. In the hidden shrines of chaos cults, in the darkened corners of hive city slums, the process accelerates. Devotees chant blasphemous psalms under the flicker of heretic candles, invoking powers that should never touch human thought. The blood, already thick with fear and desperation, becomes a medium for the warp's hunger. Some who survive the initiation speak of visions, impossible geometries twisting under invisible hands, voices speaking in tongues older than Terra itself, and an unbearable heat behind closed eyes. It is here in these moments that a mortal's will begins to dissolve, and the chaos god's promise of transcendence in truth mutates the body into something unrecognizable. The mutation is excruciating. Skin bubbles, stretches, tears, and regrows in defiance of biology. Eyes appear where none should exist, limbs twist against sinew and bone, and yet the host often retains a flicker of memory, a glance at what they once were, a scream muted by the impossibility of sound. To watch is to understand why the Imperium burns worlds rather than allow the contagion to spread. Even the servitors, the cold, unthinking machines of Mars, react to the presence of a newly forming chaos spawn with errors in their servos, stuttering in their routines as if even synthetic mind recoils from such abomination. Yet, the horror is not merely physical. Those who observe the transformations speak of an intangible dread, a sense that the universe itself recoils. The warp, once a distant abstraction observed only by psychers, now tangibly claws at the edges of perception. Reality bends around the nascent spawn. Shadows stretch in impossible directions, whispers erupt from the walls, and the air thickens with an acrid tang of fear and blood. Each mutation is both unique and grotesquely logical, a reflection of the host's deepest terrors and the warp's inexhaustible appetite for chaos. By the time the transformation completes, what stands before witnesses is neither man nor beast, but an ungodly synthesis of both, an entity designed not to live, but to unsettle, consume, and embody the very essence of madness. And yet, there is purpose in the chaos, if only a purpose the mortal mind cannot comprehend. Every contortion, every growth, every flailing, malformed limb is a testament to the dark, mutable intelligence of the warp. A chaos spawn moves not by thought but by instinct shaped by the dark gods themselves, a creature in perpetual, unpredictable motion. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus theorizes in hushed, trembling whispers that each abomination is a reflection of something larger, a miniature apocalypse, an echo of the gods' endless war with order and logic. Observers who survive the initial encounter are forever changed, carrying within them an indelible memory of the spawn's malleable terror and the realization that corruption is patient, precise, and inexorable. The human mind cannot endure this fully. Those who witness a chaos spawn's birth often lapse into catatonia, or worse, embrace the transformation in horrifying imitation. Cultists call it enlightenment. The Imperium calls it heresy. What cannot be articulated in words, cannot be codified in logic, is carried forward as instinct, as memory, as dread in every subsequent encounter. And yet, for all its horror, there is a tragic resonance. Once a mortal becomes a chaos spawn, their suffering continues beyond reason or end, a perpetual witness to the folly of mortality, in a universe where divinity is fractured and malevolent. The transformation is merciless in its subtlety as well as its brutality. Flesh does not simply contort, it rebels. Veins swell and twist beneath pallid skin, bursting in streaks of blackened ichor that reek of ozone and rot. Muscles knot and unravel like frayed cables, reorganizing themselves into shapes that mock the original form. Limbs lengthen or shrink, and digits multiply or vanish in the blink of a dying mind. In some instances, eyes erupt from sockets that were never meant to hold them, staring in every direction at once, reflecting the impossible awareness that the warp grants the spawn. The stench of promethium, charred metal, and sulfur clings to the newly formed abomination, a tangible reminder that the universe itself has been violated in its creation. Yet the creature is alive, and its vitality pulses with raw, unpredictable energy, as though the warp has chosen to breathe through it. Those who witness the process are often powerless to intervene. The most disciplined Astartes can hold their weapons steady, yet even bolters and chainswords falter against the horror of uncertainty. Every strike that lands seems to shift the spawn's form, causing limbs to reappear, torsos to warp, and claws to extend into angles that defy human comprehension. Tactical doctrine collapses under the weight of unpredictability. The battlefield becomes an arena of chaos where hope and strategy are meaningless. Survivors recall a disorienting sense that reality itself is fracturing, as if the creature is not merely present in space but bending it, a harbinger of entropy whose existence erodes the very rules that govern matter and mind. And within the spawn, if any trace of the original host remains, there is torment beyond imagination. Memories flash like broken data slates, a mother's lullaby, the taste of recycled water from a hive-spire cistern, the stench of burned promethium, the scream of comrades falling in battle. Yet these fragments are no longer comforting. They are distorted, grotesque echoes that torment and confuse. A soldier who once fought for the Emperor may find themselves unable to recognize the difference between a fellow soldier and an appendage of their own mutating body. The warp gnaws at the mind, and every fleeting human thought is crushed beneath the weight of new alien instincts. Survival is no longer a choice, for instinct has been rewritten in the image of chaos itself. The process is not uniform. No two chaos spawn are alike, a fact that terrifies the Imperium more than the creatures themselves. Some writhe and quiver, limbs spooling into tight coils, torsos bursting with jagged, spongy growths. Others surge forward like living battering rams, teeth snapping and claws slicing, moving with alarming speed despite the impossibility of their forms. The commonality is horror. Each spawn embodies a perfect fusion of unpredictability and malice, an eternal testament to the warp's indifference to order. To face one is to confront the raw, unfiltered will of chaos, a force that does not reason or negotiate, but simply exists to consume, distort, and proliferate. In the final hours before full emergence, the host's mind splinters completely. Delirium becomes dominance. Fear becomes aggression. Hope is twisted into despair. Witnesses sometimes speak of a final scream, a soundless cry that seems to ripple through reality itself, a psychic shriek that resonates in the hearts of those nearby.
It is the last vestige of humanity, ripped away, replaced by an insatiable hunger that recognizes nothing and fears nothing. And then, as quickly as the torment begins, it ceases. A new entity stands or writhes before the stunned observers. It is no longer a man, nor a woman, nor even a creature that can be rationally categorized. It is chaos incarnate, mobile, relentless, and eternal in its unpredictability. Even as the newly formed spawn slithers, lunges or collapses in convulsions, the warp continues to whisper, to tug at the fabric of reality around it. For the observers, the lesson is irrevocable. The birth of a chaos spawn is the birth of inevitable destruction. It is a moment frozen in memory, replayed in nightmares, and whispered in prayers to the Emperor on worlds far removed from the site of creation. The horror lies not in the creature's form alone, but in the understanding that the warp, patient and eternal, will never cease to create, to twist, to consume. Each spawn is a single note in a cacophony that stretches across the stars, a reminder that the Emperor's light, though vast, is not infinite, and that even in the shadow of order, madness waits. Even after the transformation completes, the presence of a chaos spawn lingers like a stain upon the mind. Witnesses speak of sleepless nights haunted by flickers of movement in the corner of vision, the faint smell of scorched metal and decay that clings to hive-spire corridors long after the creature has vanished. Veterans of the Astra Militarum recall the terror of seeing a comrade twisted beyond recognition, a living proof that the universe can mock even the most disciplined order. Inquisitors write reports in trembling hand, filling data slates with fragmented accounts, aware that the language of men is insufficient to convey the reality they have seen. And always, behind the recounting of events, there is the silent acknowledgement: the warp is patient. The dark gods are clever, and no matter how vigilant the Imperium, some horrors will always be born. The psychological imprint of encountering a chaos spawn is as significant as its physical threat. Soldiers become obsessed with patterns, haunted by the unpredictable angles and impossible forms they witnessed. Some develop compulsions, rituals to stave off what they sense lingering within themselves. Others turn to prayer, clutching the imperial aquila, reciting litanies to the Emperor, hoping that their faith can shield them from the encroaching madness. Few achieve solace. The warp's corruption is a shadow that does not pass, a constant reminder that chaos can emerge anywhere, from any failure, from any moment of weakness or doubt. It is said among some of the older custodian guard that a chaos spawn, in its earliest moments, mirrors the essence of those who observe it. A psyker may see a spawn that reflects their own fears. A guardsman may witness the warped echo of his training and discipline torn to fragments. This perception is unverified, merely whispered as legend among the Adeptus. Yet it speaks to a deeper horror, that the spawn does not merely exist in the physical realm, but reaches into the soul, bending perception and terror alike to the will of forces beyond comprehension. In this sense, every spawn is both unique and personal, a living testament to the insidious creativity of chaos. The culmination of its birth is not marked by ceremony or triumph, but by a terrifying silence. The creature, now fully formed, pauses briefly as though testing its new existence, each twitch of its malformed body sending shivers through those who observe. Then it moves, lurching, writhing, striking without thought, yet with perfect effectiveness. The battlefield, the hive-spire corridor, the ruined manufactorum, all become stages for its unpredictable acts. And the survivor's understanding of what just occurred is fragmented, incomplete, and terrifyingly inadequate. Every encounter thereafter becomes a trial not merely of combat, but of endurance, perception, and faith. In the quiet aftermath, the lesson remains indelible. The birth of a chaos spawn is not merely the creation of a monster, it is a revelation of the universe's indifference to order. A proof that even the most disciplined forces, even the mightiest warriors of the Imperium, are subject to corruption that is patient, infinite, and utterly alien. To comprehend it is to confront the fragility of existence itself. To survive it is to carry a memory that gnaws at the mind, a permanent reminder that the warp is never idle, that the dark god's influence stretches beyond the limits of perception, and that somewhere in the twisting shadows of reality, the next spawn is already taking form. Madness is not sudden, nor is it loud, nor does it always strike with visible fury. It grows slowly, silently, inexorably, until the moment of birth when the warp, patient and eternal, chooses to manifest its will. The chaos spawn is not merely an aberration of flesh. It is the embodiment of inevitability, a living testament to the horrifying truth that in a galaxy of unending war, some things are beyond even the Emperor's gaze. And from this understanding, the story of survival, confrontation, and despair begins. A path that will carry us into the full breadth of Chaos Spawn's cursed existence. The warp is never still, even in the void between stars, where light dies and hive-spire corridors collapse into silence. The immaterial sea churns, and its hunger is eternal. It devours thought, hope, and flesh alike, reshaping them according to whims older than Terra. Chaos Spawn are the living embodiment of this appetite, creatures that move with neither logic nor mercy, yet carry a single, undeniable purpose: to consume, distort, and reflect the warp's ceaseless desire. They emerge in places abandoned by the light of the Astronomicon, in worlds where the cries of the faithful fade into dust, in battlefields littered with corpses whose fear still echoes in psychic resonance. It is in these crucibles of despair that the warp manifests most vividly, shaping flesh and reality into impossible forms, giving rise to monsters whose existence itself becomes a statement of cosmic hunger. No mortal can fully grasp the scale of this force. Even the most disciplined psychers feel it pressing at the edges of consciousness, a weight that warps perception and erodes certainty. Those who survive encounters with Chaos Spawn often speak of impossible geometries in the shadows, of whispers that do not emanate from air but from the mind itself, of pain and anticipation intertwined so completely that the distinction vanishes. The creature's shape-shifting limbs, gaping maws, and flailing appendages are not merely physical aberrations. They are the warp made flesh, a relentless expression of its malice and desire. And like the ocean tides, the Spawn's hunger spreads outward, affecting the living and the dead alike, leaving a psychic wake that unsettles entire regiments of the Astra, Militarum, and deranges the circuits of the most advanced Skitarii servitors. The environments that give birth to these horrors are equally insidious. Hives once brimming with industry can become breeding grounds, abandoned manufactorums echoing with the distorted cries of those who dared oppose the dark currents. War zones, scarred and smoldering, are perfect theaters, where the mingling of death, fear, and psychic resonance allows the warp to assert itself more fully. Each Chaos Spawn is born not merely of corruption but of opportunity, a world weakened by despair, a mind vulnerable to temptation, a body already fractured by pain. The creature does not choose its location consciously, yet its arrival is never random. It is the inevitable result of the warp's patient and intelligent hunger, a force beyond morality or design, unbound by conventional war or strategy. Those who observe the Spawn cannot anticipate its movements. It moves with instinct shaped by the Dark God's inscrutable will, a chaos that adheres to no law except survival and consumption. Bolter rounds, flamers, and even the disciplined volleys of a Skitarii cohort are often met with contortion so rapid and alien that the Spawn seems to dissolve into air and reappear somewhere else entirely. The warp's hunger is embedded in this behavior, in the very nature of mutation. No form is permanent, no motion predictable, no weakness consistent. Even in the controlled laboratories of the Adeptus Mechanicus, researchers can only theorize based on fragments, data slates filled with incomplete observations, careful to note that the warp defies any attempt at complete cataloging. And yet, there is a peculiar logic behind it, one imperceptible to those who are not attuned to the immaterial currents. Some inquisitors whisper that the Spawn's movements are a reflection of the emotions, memories, and psychic imprints of the victims whose suffering nourished its birth. Others claim it is a more deliberate intelligence, one that exists not in mind, but in instinct, a consciousness distributed across countless aberrations, all feeding the same insatiable hunger. Regardless, every confrontation leaves the living scarred, every battlefield marked by the undeniable presence of a power that cannot be reasoned with or contained. The warp's appetite is not a singular force, it is an eternal, omnipresent tide. Planets once considered secure fall to corruption not through direct assault, but through subtle infiltration of fear and despair, through psychic resonance amplified by Chaos Spawn. Whole regiments of the Astra Militarum have vanished after encountering a single abomination, leaving nothing but twisted corpses and fragmented reports on data slates, proof that the warp's hunger is both limitless and precise. The creatures act as agents, extensions of a force that cares nothing for strategy, victory, or life itself, existing solely to sate the insatiable craving that drives the cosmos toward entropy. The Spawn's hunger is not merely for flesh, It feeds on terror, on anticipation, on the fragility of hope. Witnesses describe the sensation of being watched long before the creature appears, of an oppressive presence crawling under the skin, a tension that turns air into something heavy, tangible, almost corrosive. Soldiers clutch bolters with white-knuckled hands, psychers mutter prayers to the Emperor under their breath, and even the most stoic Astartes feel a pulse of unease that cannot be rationalized. The warp has made its appetite known, and it is a force that cannot be negotiated, bargained with, or understood in human terms. Every twitch of a malformed limb, every convulsion of writhing flesh, signals the continuation of a process older than the Imperium, older than Terra, older than memory. The environments in which Chaos Spawn thrive are as diverse as their forms. In the depths of derelict void ships, the metallic corridors amplify every whisper, every scrape of a claw against bulkhead, creating a symphony of dread that unsettles even veteran explorers. On battle-scarred worlds, the very ground seems to pulse with the memory of death, psychic echoes amplifying the warp's influence, giving the Spawn uncanny awareness of approaching forces. Even Hivespire undercities choked with refuse and forgotten by administrators become incubators for the unnatural, where mold, waste, and despair mingle with the immaterial currents to awaken forms that defy classification. In every case, the warp finds opportunity in neglect and fear and exhaustion. It does not need armies or fleets or machines of war. It only requires vulnerability, and the Spawn acts as its perfect instrument. The creatures themselves exhibit an intelligence that is almost alien in its simplicity. They do not plan, strategize, or reflect as humans do, but they understand instinctively how to exploit weakness. A faltering bolt gunshot is enough to provoke a reaction, a slight hesitation to signal attack. Yet even this instinct is unpredictable, shaped not by biology alone but by the immaterial hunger that flows through them. It is the warp acting in motion, the dark god's will manifest in flesh. A constant reminder that the universe is not governed by logic, order, or fairness, but by hunger and the inevitability of corruption. Observers are left with the gnawing realization that no tactic, no fortification, no discipline can fully mitigate what the warp demands. The victim's perception is often more terrifying than the physical threat. The Spawn warps reality in subtle ways. Shadows twist at impossible angles, walls seem to breathe, distant echoes of pain arrive before the creature itself. Psychers sometimes describe seeing their own thoughts reflected in the Spawn's writhing form, their fears given dimension and movement, as if the warp molds not only flesh but mind. Guardsmen report hearing the voices of the fallen, twisted and garbled, compelling them toward despair or rage, amplifying the natural panic of combat. Even mechanical devices react unpredictably, servitors stuttering or grinding to a halt in the presence of aberrant energy, their logic circuits unable to process the sheer unpredictability of the warp. Each encounter reinforces the lesson of inevitability. Chaos Spawn appear not as singular events, but as manifestations of a cosmic hunger that never ceases. Entire campaigns crumble under their presence, not solely because of direct violence, but because the psychological and spiritual toll of the warp erodes cohesion, morale, and order. Officers who believe in strategy often find themselves paralyzed by doubt. Soldiers crumble into panic, and psychers feel their powers falter as the warp asserts dominance. It is a war fought not only in flesh but in mind and soul, where the enemy's advantage is total, and survival depends on endurance, faith, and an uncanny touch of luck. The Spawn's appetite is therefore a lesson in patience, a slow, inexorable claim over the living and the dead. Where death has already occurred, they consume memory, shape, and essence. Where life persists, they warp perception, anticipating instinct, exploiting fear, and multiplying the effect of despair. Nothing escapes the hunger of the warp, and every Chaos Spawn is proof that the universe itself is a predator, patient and eternal, waiting for the next fissure in reality through which it may strike. The warp's appetite extends beyond the immediate theater of destruction. It radiates, subtle but unrelenting, a contagion of fear and psychic distortion that lingers long after the Spawn has moved on. Planets once thought secure fall into decay through the ripple of its influence. Manufactorums grow silent, machinery rusts as if infected by some unseen corrosion, and psychers report faint, insidious voices whispering of doom across worlds light years apart. The presence of a Chaos Spawn is never contained. It is a seed of entropy, and wherever it passes, the warp's hunger finds nourishment in the despair, the death, and the ignorance of those left behind. Entire regiments vanish without record, lost to the subtle tendrils of chaos that permeate even fortified positions. In one instance, a company of Astra Militarum on Cadia, though the planet is now shattered, was reported to have encountered a single chaos spawn amid the ruins of a battlefield. By the time reinforcements arrived, the survivors were either gone or reduced to gibbering, twisted shadows of themselves, their minds consumed by the psychic resonance of the warp. The creature itself had moved on, leaving only echoes of its existence, a reminder that its hunger is far greater than its body. The warp does not tire, does not sleep, and its spawn do not age or decay. They are eternal in purpose, relentless in appetite, and infinitely mutable in form. The spawn's influence is subtle as well as overt. Civilians report nightmares filled with impossible geometries, whispers in the dark, and a sense of being watched long before the creature itself arrives. Soldiers speak of compasses spinning, vox grills distorting messages, and servitors stalling inexplicably in the midst of vital operations. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus, masters of understanding flesh and machine, regard these anomalies with unease, noting that the warp's interference is not merely psychic, but almost physical in effect. It bends, twists, and corrupts not only what exists, but what is perceived, shaping reality in its own insatiable image. And yet, for all its hunger and chaos, the warp is never mindless. The spawn moves with purpose, an instinctive comprehension of how to exploit weakness. It is drawn to conflict, to suffering, to fear, each step calculated not by intellect, but by the predatory logic of entropy. Entire hives may fall silent under its influence, not because of combat alone, but because the psychic ripples it leaves in its wake unmake cohesion, morale, and order. Every act of violence, every convulsion of twisted flesh extends the reach of the warp's appetite. It is a predator that cannot be trapped, contained, or reasoned with. The only choice is to endure, flee, or perish. There is a quiet lesson embedded in each encounter. The universe is patient, and the warp hungers for more than mere flesh. It consumes hope, order, and faith alike, reflecting the fragility of the Imperium itself. Chaos Spawn are not merely creatures of mutation. They are instruments, extensions of a force that exists beyond morality or comprehension. Where one emerges, the universe shifts imperceptibly, leaving behind traces of entropy, madness, and a lingering sense of despair. Even if the creature is destroyed, the warp's hunger persists, ever vigilant, ever watchful, always ready to consume anew. As observers retreat from the scene, shaken and unprepared, the realization becomes undeniable. The warp's appetite is infinite, its spawn manifestations eternal, and the Imperium's grasp on order fleeting in comparison. Nothing in the material universe can fully resist it, and those who have seen its work cannot unsee it. The Chaos Spawn is not merely a predator. It is a herald, a whisper, and a warning. In its existence lies the cruel reminder that the warp is patient, intelligent, and ever hungry, shaping the galaxy in its own twisted image. One world, one mind, one abomination at a time. The night falls like a blade over worlds scarred by war, and in that darkness fear becomes tangible. Soldiers of the Astra Militarum trudge through cratered streets and smoldering wreckage, bolters held tight, hearts hammering against ribcages like servitors grinding in overloaded forges. Somewhere beyond sight, movement stirs, unnatural, fluid, impossible. The Chaos Spawn hunts not with strategy but with instinct, yet that instinct is tuned to terror itself. Every shadow becomes a threat, every echo a predator, and the line between reality and nightmare dissolves beneath its writhing form. Comms chatter with static and fragments of voice. Data slates record only incomplete movements, and even the most experienced veterans feel the prickle of unseen eyes tracing each hesitant step. The hunt is not silent. It is an unrelenting crescendo of anticipation, a symphony of dread composed by the warp itself. The first encounter is always disorienting. One moment the street is empty, the next it is alive with impossible motion. Limbs that bend where bone cannot, torsos that writhe like molten metal, teeth snapping in directions physics forbids. A bolter shot finds no target. Flamers scorch empty air. The creature flows through the battlefield like a living tide of chaos, unpredictably striking at the brave, the reckless, and the unaware. For those who survive the initial attack, the sensory overload is unbearable. The stench of decaying flesh mingling with ozone, the unceasing squelch of twisted muscle, the flicker of unnatural eyes catching every movement. The hunter is both everywhere and nowhere, a predator whose form is as much a distortion of perception as it is of reality. The human mind struggles to comprehend such unpredictability. Officers issue commands that fall flat, strategies dissolve into improvisation, and squads are torn apart not only by violence, but by disorientation. Guardsmen report seeing the same spawn in multiple locations at once, or limbs that vanish and reappear as if reality itself is unspooling. The warp fuels these illusions, shaping perception and bending instinct against those who attempt to resist. Panic spreads faster than the spawn itself. Hesitation becomes death, and hesitation is inevitable. Even the most disciplined psychers find their focus fractured. Their prayers to the Emperor swallowed in a haze of fear and confusion, the warp mocking devotion with every convulsion of its spawn. The hunted quickly learn that survival demands more than courage. It demands adaptation to chaos. Every movement of the spawn is a lesson in unpredictability, forcing soldiers to anticipate the impossible. Some attempt to trap it in corridors, to lure it into traps of fire and explosives, but the creature twists, coils, and contorts, undermining even the most meticulous preparations. Its intelligence, if it can be called that, is a reflection of the warp's endless hunger. It reacts not according to reason, but to opportunity, fear, and instinct. It strikes where fear is strongest, moves where defenses are weakest, and feeds on the psychological unraveling of those who dare confront it. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus trembles at the prospect. Skitarii units optimized for efficiency and order find themselves malfunctioning under the spawn's influence. Servo arms seize, targeting arrays scramble, and the neural nets of enhanced soldiers falter as if the universe itself conspires against their logic. Every encounter confirms the same lesson. Chaos spawn are not merely beasts. They are instruments of entropy, agents of a force that cares nothing for lives or strategy, only for the endless proliferation of the warp's appetite. Those who survive carry the memory forward, haunted not only by the monstrous forms they witnessed, but by the realization that order itself is fragile when confronted with such unpredictability. As the hunt drags on, the weight of dread becomes almost tangible, pressing down on every shoulder, seeping into every thought. Squads that enter derelict manufactorums or ruined hives speak of a creeping malaise, a sensation that the walls themselves are closing in, bending with the spawn's presence. Shadows stretch impossibly long, floors ripple underfoot, and the echoes of movement arrive before the creature itself. The warp's influence amplifies the terror, transforming ordinary corridors into labyrinths of fear. Soldiers stumble over debris, hearts hammering, vox grills crackle with static, and the faintest whisper, too soft to register consciously, plants the idea of imminent death. Even when the spawn is unseen, its hunting presence dominates every step, every breath, every decision. Combat with a chaos spawn is unlike any other engagement. Traditional tactics falter instantly. Ambushes fail because the creature flows around obstacles, and every defensive formation is rendered obsolete by its mutable form. Bolter fire tears through flesh that may already be twisting into new appendages. Chainswords rend air as new limbs spring from angles no human eye can track. Every encounter is an exercise in improvisation and endurance, a trial in which success is measured not by victory but by survival, and even that is never certain. Psychers report visions overlapping with reality, fleeting glimpses of worlds they have never known, impossible geometry folding upon itself, and the sense that the spawn is a nexus through which the warp gazes upon them, learning, adapting, and mocking simultaneously. The psychological toll is devastating. Survivors speak of recurring nightmares in which they are the prey, and the spawn is everywhere at once, eyes burning with alien intent, appendages twisting into forms that defy reason. Comrades become indistinguishable from hallucinations, corridors stretch endlessly, and voices, real and imagined, call out from impossible directions. Faith, courage, and training are tested to their limits. In some cases, soldiers have lashed out at allies, mistaking them for extensions of the spawn's shifting body, their minds fraying under the relentless pressure of fear. Even after the immediate threat passes, the echoes linger, leaving scars deeper than flesh wounds, fractures in memory and sanity that endure long after the warp has receded. Inquisitorial records, fragmentary and often cryptic, describe another horrifying aspect. The hunted sometimes carry the spawn with them, unknowingly. A stray psychic imprint, a lingering trace of warp energy, a flicker of aberration in movement. These can draw new spawn to a location, triggering fresh waves of horror in unsuspecting worlds. It is not merely the creature itself that hunts. It is the very echo of its existence, a resonance in the warp that seeks out fear, weakness, and opportunity. Commanders quickly learn that engagement is not a matter of defeating the spawn, but of surviving long enough to warn others. And even then, the knowledge is incomplete, fragmentary, and often too late. Yet, amidst the chaos, moments of grim clarity emerge. A veteran Astartes or a disciplined guardsman may glimpse a pattern in the madness, a subtle rhythm in the spawn's movements, a predictable reaction to certain stimuli, a temporary vulnerability. These moments are fleeting, fragile, and hard-won, yet they offer the only chance for survival. Every encounter reinforces a singular truth. The warp's creation is alive in ways both physical and psychological, and those who confront it must do so not only with bolter and blade, but with the full strength of mind, perception, and faith. The hunt is as much a trial of endurance and understanding as it is of firepower, and the haunted emerge not only scarred but fundamentally altered in their perception of the galaxy. Even when the immediate threat has passed, the hunted remain tethered to the spawn in ways invisible to the eye. Survivors often speak of fleeting glimpses in peripheral vision, of impossible shadows writhing at the edge of perception, of corridors that no longer obey geometry. Dreams become battlegrounds, where the creature strikes with the same precision and cruelty as in waking hours. Some veterans claim to hear its whisper in moments of silence, a voice that is neither human nor divine, speaking only of inevitability, hunger, and the inescapable tide of chaos. These hauntings are not merely psychological. They are the lingering impression of the warp itself, a reflection of the spawn's origin, and a reminder that survival does not sever the bond it leaves in its wake. The hunt also exposes the fragility of order. Officers who rely on discipline find it slipping beneath the weight of fear, communication faltering as vox grills crackle and static overwhelms messages. Soldiers trained for years in coordinated maneuvers lose cohesion, formations splinter, and hesitation becomes fatal. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus, whose logic circuits are designed to override fear, record inexplicable malfunctions in servitors and cogitators, as if the spawn's influence extends into the very essence of the Imperium's machinery. It is a war fought simultaneously on multiple planes, flesh, mind, and perception, where the enemy's advantage is absolute and every human effort is diminished before it even begins. Encounters with the spawn often end in fragmented testimony, scattered data slates, partial reports, and survivors who can barely articulate what they have endured. Inquisitors study these fragments, noting patterns in the chaos, yet the warp remains inscrutable. The creatures act unpredictably, yet with a consistency born of hunger. They respond to fear, exploit hesitation, and multiply the terror they inspire. Commanders quickly learn that victory is not the goal. Survival is, and even survival leaves scars that cannot be mended by bolter fire, prayer, or the rites of the Mechanicus. The hunted carry with them the knowledge that the universe itself can twist and betray, that the warp is patient, and that the spawn is an instrument of a cosmic hunger that defies containment. The haunted live with this truth, a shadow that persists even in relative safety. They move through the galaxy with the memory of impossible movement, of eyes that see every angle at once, of limbs that writhe with intelligence without reason. Entire regiments have been destabilized not by loss of life alone, but by the psychological imprint of having faced a spawn. Fear propagates, superstition grows, and the warp's appetite spreads, touching even those who have not yet encountered the creature directly. In this way, the hunt is never truly over. It extends far beyond the battlefield, beyond the reach of bolters or flamers, into the minds and memories of all who stand against the darkness. And yet, amidst the terror, there is a bitter clarity. To survive is to understand that the spawn embodies the essence of the warp's hunger, patient, eternal, and insatiable. To confront it is to face the impossible and endure. Each encounter leaves lessons etched into perception. Anticipate the unpredictable, trust instincts tempered by fear, and remember that order is fragile and chaos inexorable. The hunted emerge forever altered, aware that the galaxy contains forces no training can prepare them for, and that the very act of survival is a temporary reprieve in a universe dominated by the insatiable appetite of the warp. As the last embers of confrontation fade, the narrative widens, pulling back from the claustrophobic streets, the shattered manufactorums, and the haunted mines. The spawn is not merely an immediate threat, it is a signal, a harbinger of wider decay. And beyond the individual, beyond the skirmish, The Imperium begins to recognize a truth too dangerous to fully acknowledge. The warp hungers, and the chaos spawn are its instruments, wandering the stars as reminders that order is always provisional, that survival is always tentative, and that the galaxy is never at peace. Chaos spawn do not confine their influence to a single street, a single hive, or a single battlefield. Their presence ripples outward, touching worlds in ways subtle, insidious, and catastrophic. Entire manufactorums fall silent under their passage, the air thick with acrid smoke, the scent of melted servitor components, and the metallic tang of blood. Hive cities, once teeming with the ceaseless activity of billions, grow eerily quiet, echoes bouncing off walls as if the very stone recoils from contamination. The warp's hand reaches far beyond the immediate chaos, a slow, unyielding erosion that devours infrastructure, morale, and belief. The imperceptible spread of entropy becomes apparent only too late, when entire planetary systems begin to succumb to decay, neglect, and psychic corruption. The Imperium struggles to comprehend the scale. Inquisitorial reports, fragmented and often contradictory, describe patterns of destruction that defy conventional analysis. Worlds once considered impregnable are lost not solely to military action, but to the insidious, pervasive influence of the warp. It is a silent predator, using the chaos spawn as both agent and signal. Ships report anomalous readings in warp space. Hive-spire communications fail without discernible cause, and psychers across systems feel the tug of presences they cannot identify. Rumors circulate in hushed tones that the spawn are not just predators, but emissaries, heralds of entropy, and perhaps even instruments of a larger, unknowable design by the dark gods. None can say for certain. On the battlefield, the consequences are immediate and brutal. Regiments face losses not only from direct combat, but from fractured strategy, despair, and psychic contamination. The same chaos spawn that bends flesh and perception also bends the minds of those who survive its assault. Commanders hesitate, soldiers falter, and even the most disciplined Astartes find themselves struggling to maintain coherence under the relentless psychic pressure. Entire campaigns collapse because order itself becomes unsustainable when the warp has found a foothold. Reports speak of worlds where fortifications stand unbreached, yet the populace and the defenders are reduced to madness, paranoia, and eventually, annihilation, proof that the warp's hunger can consume far more than life alone. The aesthetic of ruin is unmistakable. Manufactorums, once monuments to human ingenuity, are corroded and warped. Cogitators spasm unpredictably. Servitors collapse into useless heaps of circuitry and sinew. Hive sectors rot from the inside, not from decay alone, but from the psychological and psychic tremors left by the spawn's passage. Even the most advanced planetary defenses offer little resistance to an enemy that is as much a manifestation of fear and entropy as it is a physical threat. Across the stars, the slow spread of chaos leaves a trail of ruin that cannot be measured in bodies alone. For systems that appear untouched bear the invisible scars of warp taint, subtle and relentless, waiting for the right moment to erupt into horror. It is not only the material universe that suffers. The warp's influence reaches into perception, prayer, and memory. Pilgrims, Adeptus Custodes, and Psychers alike report dreams and visions of worlds unmade, of structures twisting impossibly, and of creatures writhing in forms that seem to anticipate their observers' fear. In quiet forges of Mars, whispered litanies speculate that some spawn may act with purpose beyond instinct, guided by the dark gods themselves or by fragments of divine awareness long hidden in the warp. These claims are never confirmed, only passed as rumor, yet they reflect a deeper understanding that the reach of chaos spawn extends beyond mere flesh, influencing thought, belief, and the very fabric of order. The psychological effect spreads contagiously. Entire planetary populations grow distrustful. Paranoia festers in hive streets, and superstition overtakes logic. Soldiers hesitate where they once would have charged. Officers doubt commands that were previously unquestionable, and the warp's hunger manifests in subtle but devastating ways, eroding the ability to respond before the spawn's arrival is even noticed. It is a cosmic decay that mirrors the creature's mutable form, unpredictable, persistent, and horrifyingly effective. As the warp stretches its influence across the stars, the human cost becomes almost impossible to quantify. Entire worlds report sudden collapses of governance, where planetary governors and administrative councils are driven to despair or madness, their decisions warped by subtle psychic interference. Hive populations, once disciplined and industrious, erupt into riots or withdraw entirely, leaving sectors abandoned to decay, even on heavily fortified planets. The presence of a single chaos spawn can trigger a cascade of failure. Servitors malfunction, defense arrays falter, and the natural cohesion of human systems fractures under the relentless pressure of fear and entropy. It is not merely the body that suffers, it is order itself, bending, twisting, and breaking under forces no mortal mind can fully comprehend. The Imperium responds as best it can, though even its greatest fleets and armies are stretched thin across countless systems. Astartes chapters are dispatched to cleanse afflicted worlds, bolter and chainsword in hand, yet their victories are often Pyrrhic. Even when the physical spawn is destroyed, the echoes remain. Planets bear psychic scars that resist purging. Populations remember horrors they can scarcely articulate, and entire regiments are left fractured and haunted. The warp does not require the persistence of flesh. It persists through memory, perception, and belief, ensuring that even after the immediate threat is eliminated, the galaxy carries the imprint of its hunger. Observers report that chaos spawn appear with uncanny timing, emerging not at random but in locations weakened by fear, despair, or conflict. Entire fleets have been ambushed by spawn seemingly appearing out of nowhere, skirmishes escalating in ways no tactical model could predict. Even psychers trained in navigation of the immaterial tides struggle to anticipate their arrival, for the creatures seem to move according to the currents of terror itself. It is as if the warp, infinite and patient, scouts the minds of mortals, shaping the battlefield in advance to magnify the terror of the encounter. There is no strategy in the human sense, only an inevitable convergence of fear, hunger, and mutation. Rumors spread among those who survive these encounters. Some claim that certain spawn are more than creatures. They are instruments of intelligence, capable of anticipating human thought or reflecting it back in grotesque forms. Others whisper that the dark gods themselves watch through these abominations, testing worlds, sowing despair, and measuring the extent of mortal resilience. These claims remain unverified, passed as rumor and whispered liturgy among psychers, inquisitors, and battle-hardened veterans alike. Yet even the possibility is enough to deepen dread, for the spawn are never merely flesh. They are a manifestation of something far greater, something infinite in patience and insatiable in appetite. The aesthetic of destruction expands as well. Hive sectors crumble not only from combat but from neglect, fear, and psychic corrosion. Manufactorums bend and warp, servitors fail, and the very air seems to carry a taint that corrodes resolve. Even seemingly intact planetary systems bear subtle traces of the warp's appetite. Creaking corridors that were once stable, faint whispers at the edge of perception, and the persistent sensation of eyes watching from angles that should not exist. Each sign serves as a reminder that chaos spawn are not isolated threats, but nodes in a network of entropy, spreading the influence of the warp across the material universe with terrifying efficiency. The result is a galaxy in slow unraveling, a series of crises that defy immediate comprehension. Commanders grow cautious, even hesitant. Soldiers grow paranoid even in routine patrols. And psychers struggle to maintain control over forces that are already bending perception and reality. Each encounter leaves scars both tangible and intangible, and the warp's appetite ensures that the process is never-ending, relentless, and merciless. It is a lesson written in flesh, fear, and ruin, that the galaxy itself is prey, and that the chaos spawn are merely one of the most visible expressions of a hunger that spans the stars. In the cold void of space, the consequences of chaos spawn reach even further. Imperial fleets report anomalous warp signatures, compasses spinning erratically, and navigational relays that fail without discernible cause. Psychers aboard these vessels speak of shadows moving independently, whispers echoing through void decks, and visions of worlds already lost, their skies aflame with impossible geometries. Even the stalwart custodian guard aboard Terra's inner sanctums note disturbances in the immaterial tides, subtle shifts that hint at spawn influence far beyond the immediate theater of war. The galaxy, it seems, is never truly safe. Even a single spawn can seed chaos across parsecs, a ripple that spreads like a cancerous tide. Entire planetary campaigns collapse before the creature's direct intervention. Officers find orders ignored, vox grills sputtering static, and disciplined regiments dissolving into panic. What cannot be killed by bolter fire is often undone by fear, by doubt, by the insidious manipulation of the warp itself. Strategists learn too late that no fortification, no garrison, and no regiment can fully resist the entropy that accompanies the spawn. The creatures act as agents of inevitability, ensuring that despair and disorder take root, even in worlds previously considered impregnable. Reports describe hive sectors abandoned not by invasion, but by the slow unraveling of morale, faith, and cohesion, the very essence of survival eroded by psychic presence. Rumors of higher purpose circulate among inquisitors, whispered in secretive litanies. Some claim that the spawn are conduits, extensions of the dark god's will, instruments for testing the strength and fragility of humanity across multiple worlds. Others assert they are mere manifestations of the warp's endless hunger, impersonal and instinct-driven, yet terrifyingly effective. Regardless of their origin, one truth remains undeniable. The spawn exists to spread entropy, to magnify fear, and to leave in its wake an enduring impression of disorder that lingers far beyond the battlefield. Entire planets remember the horror in ways that defy data slates, etched into memory and whispered in nightmares. The aesthetic of ruin is as much psychological as it is physical. Soldiers who survive report streets that bend in impossible ways, corridors that stretch endlessly, and voices of the fallen calling from unseen angles. Civilians speak of shadows that move with intent, of sudden chills and unexplainable tremors in the air, all evidence that the warp has seeped into the very fabric of reality. Even when the spawn is gone, its echo remains, a reminder that the warp's appetite is insatiable, patient, and eternal. Entire systems bear scars that cannot be purged, hives that crumble, manufactorums that fail, and populations that descend into superstition and despair. And yet, amid this galaxy-spanning devastation, the Imperium perseveres. Fleets regroup, Astartes chapters cleanse hives, and the relentless discipline of the Adeptus Mechanicus attempts to reclaim lost ground. But every victory is temporary, every purge a brief reprieve, for the spawn are never alone. They are part of a web of entropy, nodes of the warp's will that stretch across stars, ensuring that fear, chaos, and consumption continue unabated. The lesson is stark. Survival is fleeting, order is provisional, and the universe itself is prey to an appetite that is infinite, patient, and remorseless. The galaxy is vast, and within its boundless reaches, the warp leaves fragments of eternity scattered like shards of a shattered mirror. Chaos spawn are not merely predators of flesh and fear. They are living echoes of this eternal immaterial tide, manifestations of a hunger that predates stars and civilizations. Observers, soldiers, psychers, and inquisitors alike, often report visions that suggest the creatures are more than aberrations, fleeting impressions of alien geometry, impossible constellations, and landscapes that seem to exist simultaneously in multiple planes. Each encounter is a brush with the infinite, a moment in which the warp's boundless will intersects with the fragile material universe. Those who survive such experiences are marked indelibly. Veterans speak of seeing themselves reflected in the twisted forms of the spawn, as if the creature not only absorbs life, but mirrors perception, fear, and instinct. Some claim that in fleeting moments of awareness, the spawn seems to anticipate their thoughts, reacting not to physical cues, but to the psychic tremors of dread coursing through the mind. Whether this is an instrument of the dark gods, an instinctive echo of the warp, or a hallucination born of terror, no mortal can be certain. Yet every account reinforces the same truth. The universe is older, more indifferent, and far stranger than humanity's dogma or discipline can fully comprehend. The warp itself becomes a character in these narratives, patient and eternal, feeding not only on flesh but on perception, hope, and memory. A single chaos spawn may vanish into the shadows of a ruined hive, yet its influence radiates, bending minds and landscapes alike, lingering as a fragment of eternity. Entire planets bear these psychic echoes, manufactorums corroded by unseen energies, hives where corridors twist against reason, and soldiers haunted by impossible glimpses of past and future suffering. Survival is no longer a simple measure of skill or courage. It is the endurance of mind, body, and spirit against the relentless currents of an immaterial tide. Some of the older custodes whisper that these fragments of eternity are windows into the warp itself, brief glimpses of a universe that is patient, intelligent, and incomprehensibly vast. The spawn are its emissaries, harbingers that remind mortals of their impermanence. In the chaos of battle, amid fire, bolter smoke, and the scream of the dying, these moments of perception strike with startling clarity. The galaxy is a fragile construct, order provisional, and reality itself a temporary veneer over infinite immensity. Those who witness such glimpses rarely speak of them openly, for language is inadequate to convey the terror and awe intertwined in these visions. Amid the physical and psychic carnage, a subtle beauty emerges, an ironic testament to the warp's artistry. The impossible angles, the writhing forms, the patterns of movement that defy all law of matter and perception, speak to an intelligence that is alien, eternal, and beyond human judgment. Chaos Spawn are not merely agents of destruction. They are fragments of a greater design, hints of a cosmic architecture that cannot be catalogued or comprehended. To observe them is to confront eternity in miniature, to witness the intersection of chaos and creation, and to understand that the universe is governed by forces that do not yield to mortal concepts of morality, order, or strategy. The psychological resonance of these encounters lingers long after the battlefield has gone cold. Soldiers who survive the direct assault of a chaos spawn often report recurring visions in which time bends and shifts, worlds folding upon themselves, and forms that are both alive and impossible. These fragments of eternity are not simply hallucinations. They are traces of the warp imprinted on perception, echoes of a reality in which human understanding is incomplete and inadequate. Even the most disciplined psychers, trained to navigate the tides of the immaterial, struggle to maintain coherence, their minds teetering on the edge of comprehension and madness. To face a spawn is to glimpse infinity, and few who do emerge unchanged. Yet the fragments offer knowledge, albeit dangerous and incomplete. Some inquisitors interpret the patterns of spawn emergence as signs, hints of the warp's broader designs, or the tentative guidance of forces beyond mortal perception. Reports describe the creatures appearing at moments when fear is maximal, when despair has weakened order, or when conflict creates psychic resonance sufficient to draw them forth. Whether this is coincidence, instinct, or design remains unknown. What is certain is that every encounter reinforces the idea that the universe is vast, indifferent, and infinitely patient, and that the chaos spawn are both symptom and instrument of this timeless truth. The aesthetic of these fragments extends beyond mere horror. Soldiers and psychers alike describe moments of uncanny symmetry in the spawn's movements, patterns in their contortions that suggest intention or artistry beyond mortal conception. Corridors warp, shadows stretch impossibly, and twisted limbs bend in ways that reflect perception itself, as though the warp is shaping both observer and observed. This duality, the interplay of observer and the infinite, cements the understanding that chaos spawn are more than monsters. They are intersections where the immaterial intrudes upon the material, where time and space bend, and where the fragility of existence becomes undeniable. Even in destruction, the spawn leave marks of eternal significance. Ruined manufactorums, scorched hives, and devastated worlds become both warnings and testimonies, fragments of a reality that persists despite human effort. Survivors record their experiences in fragmented data slates, sometimes in the form of litanies, prayers, or cryptic sketches, recognizing that conventional records cannot capture the enormity of what they have seen. Across systems, these traces form a silent network of knowledge, a mosaic of entropy and endurance that binds human experience to the inexorable logic of the warp. Ultimately, the presence of chaos spawn forces a reckoning with mortality, with the nature of reality, and with the limits of understanding. To confront them is to face a mirror of infinity, the fragility of flesh, the impermanence of order, and the relentless persistence of forces that predate the Imperium itself. Those who survive carry a dual gift and curse, memory of horror intertwined with glimpses of the universe's boundless, terrifying beauty. The fragments of eternity are etched into their consciousness, shaping perception, decision, and action, reminding all who bear witness that the warp is patient, eternal, and ever hungry. As the narrative expands to its final horizon, the full implication of these fragments becomes clear. Chaos spawn are more than ephemeral threats. They are enduring expressions of the warp's insatiable hunger, conduits through which eternity bleeds into the material universe. Worlds that once seemed secure can crumble under their indirect influence. Entire regiments shattered not by direct violence alone, but by the psychological and psychic echoes left in their wake. Soldiers and psychers alike carry the memory of impossible forms, of twisting corridors, and of eyes that perceive beyond matter, all serving as reminders that the galaxy is neither safe nor comprehensible. Even fleets in the void are not immune, for the warp can infiltrate perception, navigation, and thought, guiding its spawn to the most vulnerable points of the Imperium's sprawling domains. In these moments, the nature of survival shifts. Victory is not measured by slain monsters or reclaimed worlds, but by endurance and memory, by the ability to carry the knowledge of chaos without succumbing entirely to despair. Each encounter becomes both a trial and a lesson. Observe, adapt, endure, and understand that the universe is vast, patient, and indifferent to the suffering of mortals. The Spawn's mutable form, its unpredictable hunger, and its psychic resonance teach that order is provisional, morality optional, and survival a tenuous concept. Even the most disciplined soldiers emerge with the knowledge that the warp's appetite is eternal, and that no fortress, fleet, or doctrine can permanently resist it. The fragments of eternity also challenge the Imperium's understanding of the warp and its creatures. Inquisitors debate whether the Spawn act with deliberate intent, or whether they are purely instinctual extensions of the immaterial tide. Some suggest the Dark Gods watch through these aberrations, shaping events across star systems with incomprehensible patience. Others insist the Spawn are merely natural consequences of a universe that is infinite, indifferent, and ruled by forces beyond mortal logic. Regardless, every encounter, every scarred world, and every haunted survivor adds to the mosaic of understanding, however fragmentary, that humanity struggles to piece together in its ceaseless efforts to endure. Finally, there is the subtle, almost poetic lesson embedded in their existence. Chaos Spawn, though agents of destruction and terror, are also reflections of the universe's vastness and the delicate interplay between the material and immaterial. Their forms, mutable and horrific, hint at an underlying logic, a geometry of entropy, that human perception can only glimpse in fleeting moments. They remind all who survive that existence is fragile, that order is temporary, and that eternity is patient, waiting for moments of weakness to impose its will. In every encounter lies both horror and revelation, a glimpse of infinity, a brush with forces that are eternal, and the enduring reminder that in the cosmos, the warp hungers always, and nothing is beyond its reach. With that, the journey of Chaos Spawn across the Imperium concludes, not with finality but with recognition. Their story is not merely one of immediate horror, but of ongoing, galaxy-spanning consequence. The fragments of eternity they leave behind are a warning and a reflection, a reminder that the Imperium's vast expanse exists atop fragile order, and that the warp's appetite, manifested in the writhing, ever-hungry Spawn, is a force both inescapable and eternal. Humanity endures, yet the shadows of the warp linger, patient, insatiable, and waiting, a timeless echo of the universe's infinite hunger.